from beautiful Danville, Illinois. Welcome to Midday with Reverend Don. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, whatever platform you may be seeing the program on, if you type your questions or comments on that platform, they'll appear here in my chat room and we can interact directly, which is actually one of my favorite parts of this broadcast. I hope you're having a lovely day. I want to start by wishing a happy birthday to Mary Cavalcante, one of our regular viewers, and I hope that Mary is having a beautiful day today. Today, our subject is going to have to do with the character of the soul. It comes out of our conversation yesterday, and we'll start that in a few moments, but I had a couple of things first. First, I want to remind you that I am having a special on readings. If you wanted to book a reading today or tomorrow and you mentioned this program, I will give you a 20% discount. You can schedule it for any time in the future that you would like, but you must book it now. So that is my special offer of the day. Hello to Brenda in the chat room. Good to see you, Brenda. Hello to Ravenwolf in the chat room. Good to see you, Ravenwolf. Second thing I wanted to mention is I saw something interesting while tooling around the internet this morning. And it was the idea that the #1 film on the day of your birth could be used as a form of divination and a bit of a tagline for your life. And I'm not necessarily agreeing with that, but I thought I would go and look up what the #1 film on the day of my birth was. And hello to Jesse in the chat room. Good to see you, Jesse. The #1 film on the day of my birth was To Kill a Mockingbird. And I would have to say, if that film speaks to the focus of my life, I'm very pleased. I would like to think that fighting injustice has been something that I have cared about and pursued, and trying to treat people with equality and dignity. So I was positively impressed by that. So in a moment, we're going to discuss the nature of the soul. I want to give people a few minutes to get here because I know not everyone is here quite at the starting moment. But yesterday we were talking, well, these last few days, we've been talking about things like Corellian culture, how to connect with spirit guides. Today, as I say, I was going to talk about the nature of the soul because it was remarked upon in connection to these subjects. And Reverend Ravenwolf in the chat room says that they have received their statue of Baphomet for teaching purposes today, and they're happy with that. Very good, Ravenwolf. Baphomet might be a figure who could fill a whole half hour if we wanted to discuss Baphomet on the program. Baphomet is a figure that's been looked at from so many different directions, and whose actual historical origin is incredibly debatable. And Baphomet has been viewed as everything from a beneficent deity to a demon to a myth. And most people associate the image of Baphomet with Eliphas Levi, who created an image hundreds of years later that vaguely resembles what the Knights Templar supposedly venerated as Baphomet. So there's a lot in that subject. And hello to Lilith in the chat room. And Lilith says, now Baphomet is chilling on my altar with near Ishtar. I think that's perfectly fine. In my mind, I actually would consider Baphomet among my patrons in the sense of being the androgynous deity of wisdom. I come from the point of view that the name Baphomet comes from the Greek and means bathed in wisdom or initiated in wisdom. And that what the Knights Templar were doing was basically a form of probably Platonism. Hello to Diane in the chat room. It's always wonderful to see you, Diane. Hello to Jan in the chat room. It's wonderful to see you. Hello to Anna in the chat room. It's wonderful to see you. And, this is probably a good place to start our discussion of the soul because we're back at the diamond. How many different ways there are to look at any given thing. I would say to you that the soul is either really simple or really complex, depending on where and for what purpose you're looking at it. Jesse says, I would like to hear the history of Baphomet and my thoughts on it, because they believe it's been oogie boogied by some, and my goodness, it has, hasn't it? It surely has. Hello to Janet Gann in the chat room. Let me just write that down. We will make it a subject. Baphomet and the Knights Templar, because if you're not aware, that's where Baphomet supposedly comes from. And again, the origins of Baphomet are highly debated. And I guess we'll talk about that, but not today. But getting back to the diamond and the soul, how you view the soul depends on where and how you're interacting with it. Soul is part of the higher self. We were talking about the higher self. Generally speaking, well, let's go back through the 7 levels of being. And let us begin by saying that this is our way of understanding this to make it more understandable for our conscious minds. There aren't actually hard stops between these levels. And where you place those stops can and does vary depending on your tradition and your background. I come from a 7-plane background. First plane is physical. We're all aware of our physicality. We're aware of the physical world around us. It's completely understandable to us. Second level is emotional. And we all know we have emotions. We don't always completely understand them, but they're certainly readily available to our understanding. We know they're there. We know when we feel them. Sometimes we have to work to understand them, but we know them. Third is mental. We know we can think. Most of us do think. Sadly, I mean that the way I say it. We don't all have critical thinking, but we all think. And the theory is that every level that you have passed through of the 7 planes, you can readily perceive from where you are in those 7 planes. And the general theory is that humans are now either at the top of the mental plane or the lower part of the astral plane, or right on the cusp between them. So everything that I've just said, people can readily perceive. It's right there for us. The things above, we still have to work really hard to perceive. And what's above? First, the astral plane. What is the astral plane? It's where we create the world, separately and together. Hello to John. John Phillip in the chat room. And John Phillip says, hello, everyone. I was just informed about this live stream presentation in time to catch it before it ends, which is a very rarely occurring thing. I'm so glad you were informed, John Phillips. I'm glad you're here. Welcome. But as I was saying, above is the astral plane where creation occurs. When we work magic, we're working through the astral plane. When we do things like astral travel, obviously we're working through the astral plane. Many things are possible at the astral plane that don't seem possible on the levels below it. It changes everything we perceive in the universe to be working from that plane. It is where the soul creates its experience in the physical world, or co-creates, depending on your point of view and what you're talking about. Above the astral plane is the solar plane, or some would say the egoic plane. This is the literal soul. The soul is where we store all those experiences that we have in a comprehensive and understandable order through the different lifetimes we lead. And where we learn the lessons of those lives. It is our coherent us. And it's far more than a bigger image of our conscious mind. And we'll come back to that momentarily. But the soul is where we store those experiences. It's where karma is relevant to us. It's where we have our attachments that guide our purposes in this life. Above the soul is the monad. And the monad is actually what triggered this question, because it's the one people have the hardest time understanding. And hello to Craig in the chat room, who says, hello everyone, I am on the Wiccan classes lesson 3, and thanks for all you do for us. And I love the classes. Thank you, Craig, it's wonderful to have you here. But the monad, the term monad means one. Different traditions use it differently. In the Correllian tradition, it's understood to be a snapshot of deity during creation, and we regard that there are 9 of them. Each of them reflects one of the 9 primary numbers that we use in numerology. Now, I'm using the term primary in a linguistic, not a mathematic sense, although I might be, I'm not sure, math was never my strong suit. But then the numbers 1 through 9 have a special significance in numerology, and this is part of how we understand the monads. There are 9 of them. We write about them extensively in 3rd degree. And we call them monads, and we hold that their individual characteristics come from the moment in creation at which they formed. And each one formed as the goddess sent herself into the physical world to reunite with the god. And as she did this progressively, her view and her goals changed and evolved. And each of these became a monad. So each monad has its own directions that the souls within it reflect. And each monad has many souls, just as each soul has many lives, and each life has many variations. A more easy way to understand this might be to use the term soul group. So if you find soul group easier to understand than monad, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we're talking about as a monad. But we regard that just as every life within a soul reflects the same energy, every soul within a monad reflects the same energy. It's not a random grouping. And then, of course, the final level is deity, which moves through all of us. The monads, as we said, are snapshots of deity at different points in creation. They're still deity. The soul is still deity. The lives are still deity. All the parts of these 7 planes are still deity. But depending where you're looking from, they seem increasingly separate. And that separation is a reality too, but so is the unity. And to truly understand, I think, anything in deeper thought, you have to understand the resolution of opposites, how these 2 things can be true at once. And the answer to that is that it depends on how you're looking at it. Yes, your soul has a level where it's completely independent. Your life has a level where it's all that matters to you, depending on where you're at in life and how you're looking at it. That does not mean that deity is not still within you. And deity being still within you doesn't mean you're not still separate. They all come together. And John Phillips says, so this concept of monad is not the same as Leibniz's concept of monads. No, it is a different understanding, not completely unique in metaphysics. But there are several different understandings that you will encounter in metaphysics and other uses of the term. Just as there are different understandings of what a soul is. I often hear particularly certain sorts of conservative Christians talk about souls, and I find it hard to understand what they mean compared to what we mean. Just for starters, there's no way you could give away or sell your soul from a pagan point of view. It's the essence of yourself. I don't understand really what they mean. Obviously, there's a difference. The idea that you could lose your soul is not something compatible with my understanding of what a soul is, because you wouldn't be there. you would not exist without a soul. Um, it makes no sense in my background. So we use these terms differently. We all use them differently. All the different religions of the world have variations in how they view these things. But those are the 7 levels through which the soul experiences physical reality. And in a manner of speaking, we speak of that top level goddess as the divine plane. We speak of the lowest level as God. When we speak of goddess and God, at least within the sense of the Vangelo delle Streghe, we're speaking of the essence of being and its manifestation. And along the way, we also have the concept of individual gods as individual beings. And what would I say about that? Exactly what I've just said. Depends on the level you're looking at. They can certainly be that way, but they're still part of the whole. Everything is. And this is what we mean when we say as above, so below. Because the creative spirit is in everything. Everything reflects that creative spirit, and nothing is ever separate. So yes, if you happen to have, well, I'll pick something from real life. The dead squirrel in the neighbor's driveway that someone accidentally drove over is just as much a manifestation of deity as I am. Even now that it's dead, it is still a manifestation of deity. So Ravenwolf has a question. What about twins? Do they share multiple souls or a split soul? Well, we haven't really come to split souls yet. But my answer to that is it could be either. So let's talk about soul splitting, which was, I believe, what a big part of what brought this question that we're speaking of today. Let me take just a little sip of coffee to fortify myself for this one. Because on the subject of ideas that you don't hear every day in metaphysics, this is certainly one. Jenna says, I think mine are split souls. And Jan says, I'm an identical twin. And that's lovely, Jan. The idea is that if you look at creation, it does what everything in nature does. It starts with one stream and then splits again. So if you were to look at that first stream of creation coming off from deity, it first splits into the 9 monads. The 9 monads then split into the millions of souls. The millions of souls then split into the billions of lives. But they don't do it just once. They continue to multiply as they go forward. So that, and part of this has to do with the fact there are so many more people now than there were 1,000 years ago, let alone 10,000 years ago. There are obviously more souls incarnate in the world. Those souls are coming from somewhere, and we would say they're coming from the constant replication of souls, which occurs in the same way the replication of early life on Earth occurred. The same thing you see reflected in all of nature. It splits. And so, as you're doing your past lives, yes, you may find some of those famous people in your past lives, but you won't necessarily be the only person who will find them, because any given soul has branched off many times. So all the 10,000 people who think they were Cleopatra, though I'm not saying they were, could in fact have been, because her soul has undoubtedly split so many times since then that she has many people's past life. In my family, this was a major teaching. And when we look for the reincarnations of Corellian ancestors, and we can point to a number of them, although I'm not going to do so on this program because we try not to do that publicly for various reasons. But we don't expect to see only one incarnation. We're not surprised if we see more than one incarnation of a given ancestor. I did talk about some of that more specifically in the evening with the Corellian ancestors, and I may again. But generally, we think that's the private business of the people who are those incarnations. I was speaking of my own, and I'll give you an example from that evening from my own personal background. I was taught, while still a small child, that I was the reincarnation of my sister Linda, who died when she was very young. But I was also taught, although a little later, the idea that both Linda and Lady Crystal shared the same soul, and that soul was Lady Caroline. And this is mentioned, I believe, in the workshop on the ancestors and a couple of other places. But it's based on that idea that a soul can split multiple times. So when I eventually die and you look for my reincarnation, it might be more than one person. That is very much within Corellian thought, that the soul can have many incarnations sequentially, but also simultaneously. Now, how do we look at that? There are a couple of ways to look at it. We think of it generally in terms that the soul splits. When a soul has split that way, their future incarnations will be separate strains, but their past is one. You don't come back together as a rule. But you can have a much heightened psychic connection with another incarnation of your own soul, another manifestation of your own soul, or what is called a parallel life. This is the idea that your soul has many incarnations all at once. I have met a number of people I believe to be parallel lives of my own. If you ask to be shown them, you will see them, you will meet them. And usually you can learn a lot from that experience. But time, and one of our major teachings is that time doesn't have relevance for the soul in the same way it has relevance for us. So when we say the soul has many incarnations all at once, obviously these are simultaneous for the soul because the central teaching is that everything is. Time is a creation of this world to help our conscious mind understand the simultaneity of all these existences, but the soul doesn't need that. The soul isn't limited to our conscious mind, it's much larger, and it can understand what's happening simultaneously. And for the soul, it's all the now moment. I would not be so arrogant as to say time does not exist for the soul, though some do. I would say that if it exists, we don't understand how, because it's not the same as it is for us. And I don't think it takes a lot of metaphysical experience to run into this concept or to see it playing out. So this is part of the complexity of the soul as well. I sometimes tell the story of Lady Crystal when she asked to be shown one of her parallel lives. And she was shown through meditation and dreams, a redheaded artist living in a large city doing a specific kind of spiritual artwork. Years later, at a particular event, I was introduced to an artist whose artwork exactly resembled what Lady Crystal described, who had red hair and whose personality seemed pretty similar to me, which is very laid back, very gracious, very, very kindly. And I had no doubt I had met Lady Crystal's parallel life that she had asked to be shown years before. And we've been friends on Facebook ever since, although I've never said this to the person, because that would have been unsolicited. But this is part of why we say the soul is far more complex than what we understand. We only have the tip of the iceberg because we're heavily involuted in the physical world. We're here to learn certain lessons, and our field of understanding is narrowed to help us to focus on those lessons. I've had people ask, why would you forget everything from your past lives when you're born into this one? Who would want that? Well, the answer is that if you remembered everything, you might not be able to learn some of these lessons because you'd be carrying a lot of baggage. You still carry some of that baggage, but you carry less because you don't bring all of those memories in. And we're here to work on that karma, which is held by attachment, to learn those lessons and to release those attachments as one of the main reasons we're here. I believe we're also here to enjoy life, and I believe we're also here to increasingly better embody spirit in physicality. I think these are all the purposes of physical life. And although Hello to Heather Lee in the chat room. Little spoonerism there, I beg your pardon. It's good to see you, Heather. But these are some of the complexities of the soul. So when we talk about the soul, when we get into higher teachings, and you're not going to find a lot of this in our first degree teachings because these are higher teachings. But I don't think it hurts anyone to hear them or to know them. I'm a great believer in that idea, enunciated by a wise man whose name I forget, that we must guard the mysteries by constantly revealing them. And I absolutely believe that. I think one of the greatest tragedies of the ancient world is that, as far as we know, everyone who experienced the Eleusinian mysteries kept their oath to keep it secret. And so whatever wisdom it offered, we can only speculate on. I do believe some of it has come back to us through past life memory, but I don't know that keeping it completely secret did the world a service. I'm not a great believer in secrecy. I think it causes suspicion and also causes us to have to reinvent the wheel far too often. I was talking in the night with the Corellian ancestors about how one of the things that most infuriated me about my father was that he came from a magical background. He was a ceremonial. We talked a little bit about that evening. But he would not speak about his magical experiences for the most part, because he had been taught that if you speak about magic, it loses its power, which I think is ridiculous, certainly disproven by my life and the lives of other people I know. But it also means that there are certain things I know that I can definitively say, yes, he did. And a lot of things I have no idea of that might have made our relationship more understandable. I don't think that secrecy is generally a good policy. And I think it's born out of Oogie Boogieism. So there you go. Hello to Calvin from Temple of the Oak in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's good to see you, Calvin. Thank you for being here. And with that, I see we've come to the end of our half hour. And I want to take a moment to plug my Patreon. And tomorrow I am doing a seminar on Patreon at the seminar tier, which will be on the subject of mediumship and oracular work. And I'm looking forward to that. I hope those of you who are coming are looking forward to it too. And you can get that by belonging to my Patreon at the seminar tier, or by getting a ticket at CorellianPublishing.com, because it is also available by ticket. But if you'd like to join my Patreon, you can find it at RevDonLewis.com. And we have a lot of things that are very, I think very worth joining for. And John Phillips says, this was an interesting discussion. Thank you, John Phillips. I appreciate that. So thank you all for being here. I love you all. I love spending this time with you. And let us close with our prayer. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to continue to be with us and to guide us as we go forward. We rejoice in your presence in our lives, and we ask you to help us to understand complex concepts easily. And as we walk in our spiritual path, to help us always to remain flexible in our mentality so that we can accept new concepts when they come to us, and always be willing to expand our consciousness. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love, knowing you are always with us, but from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence. I love having you here every day. We'll be back on Monday. I hope to see you then. Hello to Vivian in the chat room. Good to see you, Vivian. And we will see you Monday. And until next time, may you